Hello and welcome to a very special episode of To The Point on India-Pakistan relations. Today we're going to discuss two special particular aspects of that relationship. Many in India consider Prime Minister Modi's Pakistan policy confused, some even think it's controversial. How is that policy viewed in Pakistan? Many in India believe that Pakistan is not sincere about responding to the terror we face from that country. How does Pakistan respond to that perception? With me from Pakistan to answer my questions are two former High Commissioners to India, Aziz Ahmed Khan, who was also formerly Ambassador to Afghanistan, and Salman Bashir, a former Foreign Secretary. With me from India, former Congress Minister and formerly Consul General in Karachi, Mani Shankar Iyer, and former High Commissioner of India to Pakistan, and before that High Commissioner to South Africa, Satyabrat Pal. Aziz Ahmed Khan, in India, some people view Mr. Modi's Pakistan policy as a series of U-turns. Others see it as a sort of continuous zigzag. Some even say it's just going around in circles. How is that policy viewed in Pakistan?
Well, in Pakistan, when the present government took over and when Mr. Modi took over as Prime Minister, a lot of enthusiasm was generated, particularly when he invited all the SAARC countries, heads of government, for his inauguration. It was expected that with a majority government now in place in India and the step that he had taken of engagement with the region, that we would move forward in Pakistan-India issues.
Has that expectation been fulfilled, or do you feel let down?
It is. There was a lot. People in Pakistan now feel let down because nothing has happened. No forward movement has taken place on that.
Do you believe there is a Pakistan policy that Mr. Modi has, or do you believe he's still searching and grappling for one?
Personally speaking, I think I have come to the conclusion that he's probably searching for it as yet.
Satyabrat Pal, on the other hand, there is also a view that in Mr. Modi's eyes, the priority issue for discussion with Pakistan is terror. He's happy to talk about Kashmir and other issues, but he wants first substantive talks on terror. And to be honest, Pakistan formally agreed to that position at Ufa. Would you accept, therefore, in this critical respect, Mr. Modi's Pakistan policy is significantly different to Dr. Manmohan Singh's, and at least since Ufa, it's quite clear what sort of policy it is?
Well, I think for the last few months, certainly, this government has placed its entire emphasis on getting some response from Pakistan, some satisfaction if it can, on its concerns on terrorism. And certainly the formulation in UFA would seem to have put that as the first priority. But of course, between sovereign nations, if one country's concerns are to be addressed, the other country's concerns cannot be ignored. And therefore, if Mr. Modi had felt that he could do it in sequence, it was, as subsequent developments showed, perhaps a false hope.
So you're suggesting that Mr. Modi's prioritization of terror, even though he got the Pakistanis to agree to it at Ufa, was nonetheless an expectation that could never have been fulfilled, and to continue to pursue it was possibly an error.
Priority is fine, but making that the sole issue is foolish.
Now, Salman Bashir, if I'm right in my interpretation, and it is my interpretation, but I believe Satyabrat Pal concurs with it, that Mr. Modi's Pakistan policy is to put priority first on terror. Do you in Pakistan view this as changing the terms of engagement? And if the answer is yes, how do you view that change?
I think there is an element of continuity if you look at the last 10 years. Of course, terror has been a concern on part of India. I think Pakistan has always been ready to address that concern. And there were mechanisms that were set up to deal with this issue. But as Satyabrat has just said, that's not the only issue. At Sharm el-Sheikh, although Sharm el-Sheikh became a bit controversial, India and Pakistan prime ministers had agreed that terrorism was a common threat, a common issue that needed to be dealt with cooperatively. But I think there is a fundamental, if you allow me, fault line here. There is definitely, as we see it, or as I see it in Pakistan, an effort on the part of India to reset the terms of engagement on on a completely different scale. And I think that's where the problem is.
So you do believe that Mr. Modi is trying to reset the terms of engagement, and that is what you will not accept?
I think nobody in Pakistan can really sort of accept that because, there is a history of diplomatic negotiations, there are agreements, there's a whole lot of, formats that were developed. And I think we have no suggestions even for alternative formats for that matter.
The problem with the answer you heard from Salman Bashir is that actually at UFA, formally in a joint statement issued by the two prime ministers, in fact, Nawaz Sharif agreed that terror would be discussed first before anything else. Secondly, many in India believe that Pakistan thereafter, because of domestic pressure, has tried to wriggle out of that agreement by insisting that Kashmir must be discussed simultaneously. So if today there is an impasse or a deadlock in the relationship, surely the problem has arisen because of Islamabad, not because of Delhi.
You see, India was trying to be too clever by half, because in the explanations that followed the potential breakdown of the talks, they kept on pointing to the words other issues, which was also included in UFA. And perhaps Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif felt that by saying other issues that covered Kashmir as well. But all this was a complete departure from the model that had been set up in 1997 of discussing all issues of interest to either side, including both terrorism and Kashmir. And what we needed to do was to proceed along that path. It was not a question of whether terrorism should be discussed, but a question of whether Kashmir should be excluded. As also, and we haven't mentioned this here, this sudden introduction of a catch-22 situation on the Hurriyat, saying that if you talk to the Hurriyat, we won't talk to you. And the other side saying, but we've been talking to the Hurriyat for 15 years, and who are you to suddenly tell us that it can't be done?
20 odd years, in fact. But to come back to UFA, which you say was a sudden departure from the previous agreement to talk about 7 or 8 subjects, if it was a departure, and I accept it was a departure to which Pakistan agreed. Because Pakistan had accepted that the first talks would be the talks between the NSAs. And so when Mr. Modi's supporters turn around and say that if today there is a deadlock or an impasse, it's because Islamabad has done a U-turn on what it agreed to at UFA, not because Delhi is simply standing by what UFA said.
But before the ink was dry on the UFA agreement, the BJP side was boasting in India that they had succeeded in excluding Kashmir from the discussion.
Aziz Ahmed Khan, UFA was not the first time that Kashmir was missing from an Indo-Pak joint statement at the Prime Ministerial level. UFA wasn't part of the Sharm el-Sheikh statement either. And no one in Pakistan seemed to object. I beg your pardon, Kashmir wasn't part of the Sharm el-Sheikh statement either, and no one in Pakistan objected. This time, it's become an issue of great concern. Your predecessor actually said it was a goof up. Ashraf Qazi, he wrote an article saying it was a disaster. Is it perceived as a disaster this time, but not of any consequence when it happened at Sharm el-Sheikh? Because now General Raheel Sharif has objected to it, which previously the army chief didn't do.
You see, this time the understanding that I think that what created the misunderstanding was, if you look at the first sentence of the UFA agreement, it talked about that both sides will discuss all issues.
But so, that's a preamble.
Yeah, no, there's no such thing as a preamble in a statement. It's a statement. Statement said all issues will be discussed. So Pakistan's understanding was that a program will be worked out to discuss all issues, and as that is being worked out, the first part of that program would be to start discussing the terrorism issue by the national security advisors of the two countries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that first part made it clear that the meeting between the two NSAs would be about terror.
Yeah.
Now, when that meeting was to happen, because prior to that, there had been a lot of political concern and controversy in your country over the fact that Kashmir had been left out altogether, suddenly your side began to insist, no, alongside terror, Kashmir must be discussed. No. If Mr. Modi at that point turns around and says, look, I'm simply standing and sticking by the letter of UFA, we will discuss Kashmir, but at a later point. Why is Mr. Modi in the wrong?
as far as I understand, what Pakistan had suggested before that meeting was to be scheduled, that with the National Security Advisor, the Foreign Secretary will also accompany him, and that the two Foreign Secretaries will work out a program of discussion of all issues, and following that, the two National Security Advisors will sit there and discuss the issue of terrorism. So all Pakistan was asking for was not right away discussions on Kashmir by the two National Security Advisors, but an elaboration of a program in the same form or resembling what was discussed, which was agreed to in 1997 that Mani referred to, that let's have a program whereby all issues can be discussed, but we are not shy of discussing terrorism at the national security level.
Let me put it like this, Salman Bashir. There's no doubt that many people believe that the Indian interpretation of the order in which things must be discussed after UFA is that terror first between the NSAs. But following the fact that there'd been enormous political controversy in your country over the fact that Kashmir wasn't mentioned in UFA and your Prime Minister was under pressure, do you believe that in fact the Indian side should have said, we need to help Nawaz Sharif because without helping him, no talks at all are possible. So all right, come and talk terror, let the NSA stick to terror, but let there be side meetings between perhaps foreign secretaries or when the NSA calls on the Prime Minister, where Kashmir isn't discussed substantively, but at least a schedule is worked out about when Kashmir talks will happen. If that had been something the Indians had offered, and Sartaj Aziz in a separate interview to me actually said this could have been a way of solving the problem, do you think as a former secretary that would have worked?
You see, the point basically, as I said, when I say that there is an effort on the part of India to reset, if at all, the terms of engagement, it means, as we see it, excluding Kashmir or excluding other difficult issues like Siachen or Sir Creek, etc. Now,
so then it follows that Ashraf Qazi is correct that your agreeing to UFA was a disaster and a goof up because UFA excludes Kashmir.
But I'm sure this was not the way it was understood by our leadership at that point in time.
Surely, Kashmir is so important to you, you wouldn't let it be covered by the vague words other issues.
But I think you have to see it, it only shows the spirit of accommodation on the part of Pakistan to agree to what we see is a common problem, terrorism, to agree that at the level of the National Security Advisors, on the understanding that it would lead to the full resumption of the full dialogue process.
So then do you accept the point I began with? That if the Indian side had said, we need to help Nawaz Sharif because he's got into trouble, because if we don't, he can't have talks with us, and therefore, whilst the NSAs won't talk anything other than terror, let the two foreign secretaries have a side meeting or let the NSA bring it up when he meets the Prime Minister. Would that have sorted out the problem and provided an opportunity for those talks to go ahead?
Karan, I think a more fundamental point here is, since the change of government in Delhi, I think we have not heard anybody say, a person at the level, at that level, you know, in authority, that Kashmir is still an issue. There was a point in time when Kashmir for India was to be dealt with in accordance with the Simla declaration, the Simla agreement, which led to the formats that were developed subsequently. Now, even a stage later, there was the back channel, you know, which was, as we all know, trying to work a solution in Kashmir. The back channel is absent. The composite dialogue format has been scrapped, and there is no indication by the Indian side, not only in terms of resumption of dialogue, but the BJP position is that Kashmir is not an issue.
Let me put that to you, Manishankar. Do you believe, as you've heard from Salman Bashir, that in fact, behind all the language, the tactics and strategy that Mr. Modi's government puts up, the real intention is to avoid talking about Kashmir and to operate as if Kashmir is no longer an issue? Do you accept that?
The real intention is to hegemonically tell Pakistan what it is that is acceptable and what is not. If you have this kind of an attitude, as is also being shown with respect to Nepal and was at one stage shown with respect to Myanmar, then whatever was the spirit of the 26th May 2014 encounter here in Delhi has just evaporated.
Except that treatment of Bangladesh has gone the opposite way.
No, only
And
to
Sri
the
Lanka too.
No, only to the extent to which an agreement negotiated by our government was finally signed.
But pushed through by this. Let's be
but
generous.
it was
Let me-
negotiated by someone else.
Let me, Satyabrat Pal, at this point broaden the discussion, because this, I think, flows very neatly into what Mani Shankar Iyer said in Pakistan in a television interview. He said that whilst Narendra Modi continued as Prime Minister of India, and he will continue for the next 3.5 years at least, substantive, meaningful talks with Pakistan would not be possible. But the truth is, it was Mr. Modi who invited Nawaz Sharif for his swearing in, and no Indian Prime Minister has done that ever before. It was Mr. Modi who initiated the Foreign Secretary level talks, although eventually they didn't happen and they were called off. And it was Mr. Modi who insisted upon UFA and persuaded the Pakistanis to meet. Therefore, is Mani right in saying no meaningful talks can happen while Mr. Modi continues, or do the facts, as I've presented them to you, contradict Mani?
I think no Indian Prime Minister can afford to ignore Pakistan forever. And again, simply by virtue of the fact that we are neighbors with a fairly difficult history, it becomes essential for any Indian Prime Minister, and for that matter, any ruler in Pakistan, to accept that constructive engagement is essential. And I think
But my question was pointed. Do you believe that no meaningful talks are possible while Modi continues as Prime Minister, or have the facts I cited suggest that he's taken several initiatives?
I think that it will be necessary and that the Prime Minister of India will respond as his predecessors have and enter into constructive engagement with Pakistan, because there is no alternative.
So you do disagree with Mani then?
On that point, yes.
Let me get the view of my two Pakistani guests before I come back to Mani on this critical issue. You've been High Commissioner in India. You've been in India for the last 2-3 days. You've seen the mood in this country. You've seen how Indians of different colors, stripes and political persuasion see Mr. Modi. Do you believe meaningful talks with Pakistan are possible under Mr. Modi, or do you agree with the skepticism of Mani Shankar Iyer?
After a year and a half, I am getting a little disabused of my enthusiasm which I had in the beginning, and I am beginning to veer to the point which Mr. Mani Shankar Iyer has said, that perhaps there is a lot of facade of engagement, but the real intent is just to keep it superficial and not have a meaningful dialogue.
Let me put the very same question to you, Salman Bashir, because in addition to being High Commissioner in India, you were Foreign Secretary. Do you share Mani Shankar Iyer's view that meaningful substantive talks with Pakistan will not happen while Mr. Modi continues as Prime Minister, and that means for at least 3.5 years? Or are you more optimistic, as is Satyabrat Pal, that the exigencies of our relationship and the compulsions of the Prime Ministership mean Mr. Modi will have talks? And remember, he's taken 3 significant initiatives which I've endlessly repeated. So where do you stand on that issue?
I think he will probably at some point in time have to rethink his approach towards Pakistan. I think the first opportunity, the first test will come next year for the SAARC summit. And if that is going to happen, then there's need for a preparatory process that ought to be set in motion now. I think Satyabrata is correct. There is no rational alternative to India as I see it. You cannot endlessly ignore Pakistan. But in Pakistan, no Prime Minister and no government and no parliament, and either the people of Pakistan would accept a radical change of the terms of engagement as is being indicated to us.
But you do believe that at some point, perhaps before the SAARC summit happens next year, Mr. Modi will have to rethink and once again take an initiative vis-a-vis Pakistan?
It is a question basically whether, we had, as Aziz said, we had initially viewed him in much by his light, but it is now becoming increasingly questionable whether that transformation would take place.
Mani, it's very interesting. Your Indian colleague Satyabrat Pal disagrees with you. Aziz Ahmad Khan is veering around to your viewpoint. And my interpretation of Salman Bashir is that he's neither fully in agreement nor in full disagreement. You don't have complete support on this point, either from the Pakistanis and certainly not from an Indian colleague.
I don't seek it. I don't seek it at all. I'm trying to tell you that in my view, you have to have the right kind of mindset to engage meaningfully as distinct from engaging on the surface. To engage meaningfully, an Indian Prime Minister has to eschew all hegemonistic ambitions. He has to be accommodative rather than authoritarian, and he has to be totally secular. And I think Mr. Modi fails on all three counts.
Gentlemen, let's take a break at that point. When I come back, I want to talk about India's perception that Pakistan is not doing enough to tackle the terror we face and how you respond to that. Let's come to the subject of terror, which is on everyone's mind after the ISIS attacks on Paris, and even more so today after the hostage-taking and the attacks in Bamako, Mali. Aziz Ahmed Khan, from Mr. Modi's point of view, the key problem is the perception that Pakistan is not sincere in tackling the terror India faces from LET, from Jaish, from Hafiz Saeed. Can you itemize for me the 2 or 3 things you've done to prove that that perception is wrong?
Starting with the meeting between Mr. Vajpayee and President Musharraf on the sidelines of SAARC summit in 2004, where the declaration categorically stated that Pakistan would not allow its territory to be used against any country.
The question is, how have you fulfilled that?
Number one, immediately measures were taken, and every effort was being made that not to allow that. Now, fighting terror is not an easy thing. It is not that you just can immediately shut everything, but even by admission of your own security forces, is that thing has gone down considerably. And lately there have been statements that there is no crossing at all across the LOC of any elements, insurgents.
I'm not sure whose statements you're
This was
quoting.
from
The
the
Indian
military.
press has very different statements, but I'll accept your point of view. Satyabrat Pal, you were High Commissioner in Pakistan when 26/11 happened. Undoubtedly, you followed the tortuous terror trial of Lakhvi and 6 others, which has continued for 7 years. You're aware of the way Lakhvi's got bail. You're aware of the way Hafiz Saeed is treated. So let me ask you that question. Is Pakistan sincere in tackling the terror India faces from that side of the border? Or do you believe Pakistan's steps are ineffective and sometimes just cosmetic?
I think on this point, Mr. Modi probably has good grounds for skepticism. I completely take the point that Aziz made that post-2003, the then government of Pakistan did take some steps, serious steps, which took some time to have effect on the ground. But over the last few years, there's been equal backsliding. And that too, I think, our Pakistani friends will have to recognize. The point that Aziz made, that infiltration has dropped almost to zero, I've seen statements to that effect as well. But the general, the Indian general who made that point, said it had dropped because now their interception was much more effective, and therefore they were stopping people before they managed to get in. But the attempts continue. The significant difference is that from 2006...
And can I interrupt and say there was Gurdaspur and Udhampur just earlier this year?
That's right. In 2006 and in early 2007, Salman will remember that infiltration attempts had dropped almost to zero. That is a significant difference from then to now.
This is very interesting, and I'm pointing out for the audience, it may be that actually infiltration in terms of success has dropped to zero, but infiltration attempts are continuing, whereas earlier, even attempts had dropped to zero.
That's right, and they've surged of late.
Salman Bashir, you were Foreign Secretary at the time of 26/11, if I'm not mistaken. The head of your federal investigative agency then was a man called Tariq Khosa, and he's extremely well known to you. In an article that he wrote for your paper, Dawn, earlier this year, he confirmed that Ajmal Kasab and the LET terrorists who attacked Mumbai were trained in Sindh. The casings of their explosive devices were found there. The engine of the dinghy they used was imported from Japan to Lahore and then sold by a Karachi sports shop, and the operation room was in Karachi. More importantly, he added the following sentence, and I'm quoting him: Pakistan has to deal with the Bombay mayhem planned and launched from its soil. This requires facing the truth and admitting mistakes. If Mr. Modi says to you, at no point has anyone in Pakistan ever admitted the mistake, and therefore I'm right in believing they are not sincere in tackling the terror we face from their side, how would you answer him? Because I haven't heard anyone from Pakistan say, I accept this mistake, I admit up to it, other than Mr. Khosa.
Well, of course, Mr. Khosa, Tariq Khosa has reasons to say what he said. And I think his statement, his article has been misunderstood. As you said rightly, I was the Foreign Secretary. I know exactly what our intelligence agencies, even before the FIA got into it, did to collect all the evidence. And if Tariq Khosa, who did the investigation subsequently, where all the evidence had been collected by the Pakistan intelligence, it doesn't really prove that the state of Pakistan was involved. True, these persons were from Pakistan and all that had happened. And subsequently, as you know, a lot of information was exchanged between the two sides. So I don't think that this goes to prove that the state of Pakistan or the institutions of Pakistan were involved. The fact is that we had on our own done the initial investigation and collected evidence, obviously, to get to the heart of the matter.
So when Mr. Khosa says this requires facing the truth and admitting mistakes, you disagree with that last sentence?
No, I don't disagree, because this is exactly what has happened in Pakistan. I think there's
you have admitted mistakes?
Total misreading in India about the issue of terrorism
in which
Pakistan.
case, fill in the audience and tell us when and who admitted the mistake, because that's news to me.
No, admitting mistakes in the sense that the very fact that we collected the evidence, we put these people on trial, which is a judicial process. So it shows that we've been active on this and that we were responsible. And there are other areas that need to be, also considered. I mean, who was responsible, for instance, the Abbottabad, the Peshawar public school attack? There have been so many incidents of terror.
Who was responsible? Are you suggesting someone?
No, what I'm to say is that now Pakistan has given evidence to the UN of Indian involvement in sponsoring terrorism in Pakistan. So I think let's stop all this and let's start to sort of
very quickly, because I don't want to get into an Indo-Pakistan tutu meme, but since you were High Commissioner at the very same time as Mr. Bashir was Foreign Secretary, do you accept Mr. Bashir's answer that mistakes have been admitted in the sense that a trial was launched, investigation was done, that Mr. Khosa is actually referring to evidence that Pakistan's intelligence agencies got, which means that the state has been doing all it can? Do you accept that? Because you were there at the time and you know.
Well, I remember being present at a briefing that we were given very early on in the game, where some of this evidence was presented to us. But the fact remains that thereafter, the trial has gone on far too long. It is not entirely clear, certainly to people in India, that the prosecution is being vigorously taken forward.
In fact, the judges have changed 7 times.
That's right. And therefore, there is, I think, in Pakistan, there should be a recognition that this was a rather difficult time. And if we are to go forward, we have to put this behind us. And we cannot put this behind us unless we have closure, which we do not have at the moment.
I'll come to you in a moment's time, Mani, but let me quickly go back to Aziz for a second. One key issue that remains is the fact that you haven't been able to obtain the voice samples, which both your prosecutors and the Indian side say are essential for convicting Lakhvi and the 6 others. Now, I accept that Lakhvi and the 6 have refused to give samples, and I accept that the Sessions Court has upheld their right to refuse. But there is an appeal at the High Court that's been languishing for 3 years or 4 and more, and it's not being pursued by your government. And Tariq Khosa has now made clear that the 2013 Fair Trial Act actually does permit you to get those voice samples, but your government doesn't seem to be using that act. And that seems to cause concern in India, because they say either there's a lack of political will, or if there is the law that permits it, it's not being used. But as a result, Lakhvi is now out on bail. The case is going nowhere, as you heard Mr. Pal say.
Actually, there are 2 points here. One was voice samples that India had asked for, They are no longer necessary because that trial is closed, Kasab has been punished, and the trial is over. The voice samples, now Pakistan is asking for the voice samples of the recordings that you have so that we can check it and give it as an evidence.
No, but the voice samples that are missing is to match actual Lakhvi's voice to the voice samples that the Americans, the Brits and the Indians have already given you.
They have not given the voice samples. That is the voice samples that we are asking for from India.
So you're saying for 8 years that the voice samples of the actual conversations between Lakhvi and others and the terrorists in Mumbai have not been given to you?
My understanding is that these are the voice samples that Pakistan is asking for the trial in Pakistan.
The Indian interpretation is different. The Indian interpretation is that the reference to voice samples in Ufa was actually obtaining Lakhvi so you can match it against the voice samples of the real conversations which you already have. But you're saying to me, your interpretation of Pakistan is the opposite.
Lakhvi's voice samples that you have, Lakhvi is in Pakistan, so if we needed the voice samples that way, we could get them. We don't have to ask India for that.
Let me come back to Tariq Khosa because he says something else which I want to put to you. And it's quite significant. It was commented upon in a pretty big way in an interview he gave me by our former NSA MK Narayan. This is what Khosa says. The Pakistan authorities should not forget that the FIA declared various other facilitators and operatives as fugitives in this case. The trial will not be over with the disposal of those under arrest, that is Lakhvi and the six. It also needs to tackle these other people. He says other missing links need to be uncovered before the absconder's arrest can happen. In other words, there's a lot more, Khosa is saying, that Pakistan is not doing. Now once again, when Khosa admits that, does Mr. Modi not have some justification in saying, look, your own people are pointing out you're not taking it seriously, they're aware you need to do more but you're not doing it. Therefore when I ask you to do more, I'm justified in saying it.
That we are justified in saying it is not really the moot issue. Are we going to lecture the Pakistanis or are we going to engage with them to get matters moving in the direction that we want? I think the most significant statement that we've heard here is that when the talks were going on the back channel and otherwise, there was a sharp drop in the number of infiltrations or even attempts at infiltration. The same holds true with regard to ceasefire violations by the armed forces on either side. Now, therefore, I believe that we are putting the cart before the horse by saying stop doing everything which we want to discuss with you before we discuss it with you. Let's discuss all this with them. And that's the way we'll be able to move. Without that, they'll start pointing fingers to us that we've been equally tardy in investigating and prosecuting those responsible for the Samjhauta Express.
But coming to the end of this discussion, I want to pick up on the point that Mani made. You've been High Commissioner and I believe the point he made is one that you agree with most of the time. That when talks are happening, India is really the beneficiary because infiltration levels drop. It's when talks stop that the cost for India becomes greatest. And therefore, it's in India's interest to always continue the dialogue, no matter what the circumstances. For an audience that is perhaps skeptical of that viewpoint, can you explain why you hold this viewpoint?
Well, if you have a problem between two countries, you can either settle them through violence, through war, which really is not an option between two nuclear-armed states, or you can try to resolve them through sustained negotiations. There is no third way. We have a series of extremely difficult problems which we have to address mutually. And if we do not talk, we will never get anywhere. And it's particularly when you have a problem that you must talk even more. Simply to go into a sulk and to say that I won't talk to you because you're not doing what I want you to do is not a very serious way of conducting relations with another state.
Do you mean that Mr. Modi has gone into a sulk?
Well, we seem to have, collectively as a nation, vis-à-vis Pakistan.
I mentioned earlier that you've been here for 3 or 4 days. You've had a chance to sense the mood and feel of the people as well as the government. Do you believe that the time has come to break the impasse by Mr. Modi reaching out? Or do you think, given the present circumstances, it might be best to wait a while because in this present atmosphere, any reaching out won't work?
I think a lot of precious time has been wasted already. I think Mr. Modi should reach out, because in Pakistan, where there was a lot of enthusiasm at the political parties level, at the popular level, that we should move forward with India and resolve our differences and have good relations. Now people are getting a bit skeptical, and a feeling is emerging in Pakistan that India is probably not serious about resolving issues with Pakistan and moving forward and having normal relationship. And that would be a very unfortunate thing, that something that was very there was a lot of enthusiasm for. And don't forget that even when Mr. Nawaz Sharif was campaigning for his elections, in India came in only by the mention that we should have good relations with India, not India bashing, but the desire for improving relations with India, and that was across all political parties. Now we have wasted a lot of good time, and I think the sooner he moves, the better it would be for us.
This is what you meant when you began at the very beginning of this interview to say Pakistan feels let down by Mr. Modi.
Yes.
In other words, you had great hopes and expectations, backed up by your own desire to improve relations, and you feel not only has the opportunity been missed, but you feel let down.
I personally feel, yes, I can't speak on behalf of the government, but I personally feel that, yes, and I can feel that among a lot of Pakistani people who talk about it and who discuss this.
Salman Bashir, you've been Foreign Secretary, and therefore you have a very familiar and intimate understanding of how governments, and more importantly, how prime ministers think and operate. And prime ministers, when they're under pressure, be they Indian or Pakistani, British or wherever, are difficult people to cajole and persuade, because they have so many political compulsions at the same time, many of which are contradictory. If Mr. Modi, because in his eyes he believes Pakistan has backed out of what they agreed to at Ufa, doesn't take an initiative, what are the chances Mr. Nawaz Sharif might? And I don't want to press this point, but at the end of the day, I imagine as a smaller economy, you probably suffer more, because the percentage of the money going into your military budget is considerably greater, and that's needed to eradicate poverty, to boost health and education. Given all of that, and Mr. Nawaz Sharif as a businessman will be very conscious of it, what are the chances he may help out Mr. Modi and take an initiative?
Karan, I think one thing is very clear, and I think I must state this very bluntly to you. I'm sorry to do that. In my tenure here and as the Foreign Secretary, I did my best to see how we can move our relations in a positive trajectory. But the fact is, the bottom line is that Pakistan will not move. I think we have been pressed to a point where it is no longer possible for anybody in Pakistan, particularly the Prime Minister of Pakistan or even the Parliament of Pakistan, now to do more in terms of gestures. I think even asking for talks or resumption of talks is something that is not really applauded by our people anymore. I think India has to realize, and the Prime Minister of India has to realize, the consequences of what is happening and the effects in Pakistan. Two, I think it is important that the two foreign ministries, the institutions, they take up their responsibilities. The foreign ministries have a mandate to engage, to improve relations. I think if the foreign ministries are given the space, to craft imaginative initiatives and policies, things could happen.
You've put it very honestly, bluntly. But what you're really saying, and I'm simply seeking confirmation, is that the mood in Pakistan is, if you want to talk to us, you take the initiative, you take the first gesture. If you don't, we don't care.
Karan, I think in India, the predominant view is that Pakistan is in a mess. And I think now the view in Pakistan and India, and I'm again sorry to say it in your program, that India is in a mess.
You couldn't have said it more honestly, even if many who listen to you would completely disagree. And the message that I think is going out is that there is a real impasse here, a real deadlock. Someone needs to reach out, and both of you have made it clear that someone is not going to be Pakistani. And the answer is therefore obvious. I'm going to have to end there on this rather somber and sobering note. My thanks to all four of you for joining us and for this revealing and eye-opening discussion. There we end this particular episode of To The Point. If you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.